Rachel Emery perched on her narrow twin bed, clutching the wrinkled eviction notice as though staring harder might transform its harsh reality. The paper remained unchanged. 30 days, that's all her landlord had granted after the third rent increase in 12 months. What was once barely manageable had become completely impossible. Like so many other things in her life, Portland's persistent drizzle traced gray patterns down the window panes while the indoor atmosphere grew increasingly suffocating. From the adjacent room came Jonah's harsh, grating cough. Rachel knew without checking that their humidifier had run dry again, with no distilled water left to refill it. Rising from the bed, she padded barefoot to their cramped kitchenette and opened the cabinet door. Inside, 2 instant oatmeal packets, a half-empty peanut butter jar, and 1 remaining bottle of Jonah's essential medication. She shut the door gently, as if quiet movements could somehow multiply their meager supplies. The microwave's digital display flashed 2:14 a.m. Sleep should have claimed her hours ago. She faced a 5-hour coffee shop shift followed by her evening cleaning job at the medical clinic. Yet rest proved elusive these days, weighed down by impending homelessness, mounting bills, and a son battling a serious immune condition. Her phone buzzed against the counter. A notification from some local auction site she couldn't recall joining appeared on the screen. Small cabin on wooded property. Opening bid $900. Elder Pines County auction. Rachel blinked at the display. $900 for a cabin. She tapped the link, expecting either fraud or error, but found what appeared legitimate. The listing was sparse, vacant since 1989. Major repairs required. Sold as is. Property includes 2 acres of forested land. No inspections permitted. All risks assumed by purchaser. 3 blurry photographs accompanied the description. A weather-beaten structure with a drooping porch, windows consumed by creeping vines, and a gravel path nearly invisible beneath overgrown vegetation. The place looked haunted, yet Rachel found herself transfixed not by any beauty, for there was none, but by the possibility of ownership. Something no one could snatch away with a notice mailed to the door. She clicked through to the auction details. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., in person only, cash or certified check required. Her breath hitched. Her savings account held exactly $92.35 every penny she'd managed to scrape together over 12 months. Emergency funds, gas money, birthday tips from work, all of it. For long moments, she sat frozen in the kitchen chair, her face illuminated by the screen's ghostly glow. Every logical thought screamed against this impulse. She'd never seen the property, had no idea if the roof leaked, the floors held, or wild animals had claimed it as home. Then Jonah's cough erupted again, more violent this time, and Rachel recalled her grandmother's old saying, sometimes the only escape route leads straight through the flames. She picked up her phone and made her choice at 8:45 a.m. Rachel stood on Elder Pines Courthouse steps, a modest mountain town 2 hours from Portland, clutching an envelope containing $900 and feeling perspiration beneath her coat despite the cool air. Her blue interview blazer pulled tight across her shoulders, and her uncomfortable heels pinched with each step, but she appeared professional. She had to. The auction chamber featured low ceilings packed with people who clearly hadn't missed. Many meals. Property developers, house flippers, men with perfectly groomed beards, women wearing boots worth more than Rachel's vehicle. She located a seat in the rear and tried to become invisible. The auctioneer spoke rapidly, rhythmically. Bids flew for warehouses, townhomes, land parcels. Everything sold for thousands, tens of thousands. Her cabin appeared after an hour lot. 172, parcel 44, county foreclosure, locally known as the Westwood Cabin. Opening bid, $900. Silence filled the room. No hands moved. Do I hear 900? The auctioneer repeated. Rachel raised her trembling hand. 900 from the lady in the back. Do I have 950? No response followed. Going once. Going twice. Sold to the woman in the blue jacket for $900. The gavels crack echoed like thunder. Rachel sat stunned. She'd anticipated competition, multiple bidders, some trick, but nobody else had wanted it. Nobody except her. The clerk handed her a manila folder and a single rusted key. That's the old Westwood place, isn't it? She murmured. Rachel looked up. I'm not sure. The listing just said cabin. The clerk hesitated, then offered a polite smile. It has quite a colorful past, been empty for ages. Best of luck. Walking from the building, the paperwork felt impossibly light in her hands. She just spent everything she owned on property she'd never seen, didn't even know if it had functioning. Plumbing. Yet something deeper stirred within her, a hum of possibility. Not joy or relief, but potential. She opened her phone and dialed the school. Hello, this is Rachel Emery. I need to collect my son early today. Yes, it's a family emergency. A new chapter was beginning, and even if the ink smeared or pages tore, she would write it herself. The winding route to Elder Pines proved narrower than Rachel had expected. Bordered by moss-covered trees and shrouded in morning fog, Jonah sat. Beside her, clutching his inhaler, forehead creased with concern. So where exactly are we headed? He asked cautiously. Rachel hesitated. To see something that might be ours. Might? She forced a smile. Okay, it is ours. I purchased it, a house. Jonah stared at her. With what money? All of it, she admitted. $900. He continued staring. You bought a house for less than a used gaming console costs? More like a cabin. And, well, it needs work. Jonah leaned back slowly, quiet for several moments. Is this like when you claimed the car only needed a new battery, then we discovered it needed a whole transmission? Rachel laughed despite everything. Possibly worse. The GPS chimed. Turn right in 300 feet. Pavement ended and gravel began. Trees closed around them, ancient beyond memory. They passed a rusted mailbox with barely visible numbers. 11,439. Rachel braked. There stood the Westwood cabin. It resembled something from a forgotten photograph. Weathered pine siding, half-collapsed roof on one end, a porch sagging like weary shoulders, vines snaking up the walls like veins, and forest beginning to reclaim the yard. One window gate broken, a bird fluttering from the shattered frame as they parked. Jonah exhaled slowly. Cool haunted cabin, love that for us. Rachel shut off the engine and faced him. Look, it's not perfect, but it's ours. We'll make it work. He didn't respond. They stepped into silence so profound it felt like holding breath. The air carried scents of wet leaves, aged wood, and something more elusive like memory itself. Rachel approached the door and inserted the rusted key. It stuck. She wiggled it until it yielded with a metallic groan. The door creaked open, revealing darkness. Inside, dust particles danced through shafts of gray light. A wooden table sat buried under pine needles and mouse droppings. The air hung stale, tinged with the earthy scent of mold. She activated her phone's flashlight. The beam swept across aged furniture, a toppled rocking chair, broken lamp, torn curtain fluttering in the breeze from a cracked window. The cabin had been abandoned exactly as someone had left it the day they walked out forever. Jonah stepped in behind her, pulling his hoodie over his nose. Smells like wet ghosts? Rachel chuckled, though she felt a chill too. Something about the stillness seemed too complete, too deliberate. They explored cautiously. The main room opened into a small kitchen with rusted appliances and cracked tile. Countertops. Cabinets hung open, some empty, others still holding forgotten cans and yellowed recipes. A wall calendar read October 1987. A short hallway led to two small bedrooms and a bathroom. In one room, a child's bed frame remained, mattress gone, a faded star mobile dangling overhead. The other contained a desk beneath a boarded window, bookshelf, and an old coat still hanging from a wall nail. Someone just left, Jonah whispered. Like they ran. Rachel nodded slowly. She sensed it too, that eerie feeling of interruption. As if life had paused rather than ended. They returned to the living room. Rachel opened the back door, revealing a narrow porch and dense trees beyond. As she stepped out, her foot landed on something hollow. She knelt, brushing away moss to reveal a loose board. Curious, she pried it up. Beneath lay a shallow space filled with rotting leaves and something more, a tarnished tin box, cold too. The touch. Rachel hesitated, then lifted it out. What is it? Jonah asked, moving closer. She opened it. Inside, an old leather-bound notebook, a faded Polaroid, and a rusted key with a small tag reading lab. Rachel picked up the photograph. It showed a woman standing before the cabin tall with caramel skin and striking features. One eye bright blue, the other deep brown. Wild curls framed her face. She wore a lab coat and a gentle smile. Scrawled on the bottom, Lara, March 1986. Rachel stared at it. This must be her. Who? Jonah asked. The woman who lived here before. Dr. Lara West. Doctor? She lived here? Rachel opened the notebook. Inside, elegant cursive filled the page's notes, plant sketches, chemical structures, journal entries. The first line read, "This place chose me. I hope it chooses the next one wisely." A chill ran through Rachel. She turned the page. Compound 7 shows increased immune cell regulation. Possible breakthrough for genetic immunodeficiency. Her heart pounded. Jonah leaned over her shoulder. What does that mean? Rachel swallowed hard. I'm not sure yet, but it appears to be research. Important research. She closed the notebook carefully and examined the key. Lab. Do you see any outbuildings? She asked Jonah, scanning the tree line. He pointed toward the woods. There's something metal behind those trees. Like a shed, but different. Rachel pocketed the key. The atmosphere had shifted. She felt it not fear, but the awakening of something old, forgotten, waiting. She glanced back at the cabin. No, this place wasn't haunted. It was protected. That night, Rachel barely slept. She lay on the old mattress they dragged into the cleaner bedroom, arm protectively over Jonah, listening to every creak the cabin made. The forest outside whispered against the siding, branches scratching like fingernails on windows, but these weren't just typical sounds of a forgotten house. Settling. Something about this place didn't rest. Rachel's thoughts circled endlessly. The notebook she'd discovered Dr. Lara West's journal sat on the bedside table. She'd read the opening pages 3 times. The entries were part scientific log, part personal confession, written in a voice both precise and poetic, yet unsettlingly lonely. Lara had lived here alone, but not without purpose. Her words crackled with urgency. They want the formula, not the healing. They want control, not cures. I told them no. Now I wait. Rachel didn't know who they were yet, but she could guess. When Jonah finally fell asleep, breathing light and rhythmic, she sat up and pulled the journal into her lap again. One entry caught her attention, dated just 3 weeks before the woman vanished. Compound 7 is showing increased regulatory impact on IL-2 receptor sites. If my theory holds, this may be a breakthrough treatment for GD disorders with minimal side effects. This is no longer academic. This is personal. Rachel froze. Good. Genetic immunodeficiency disorder. Jonah's exact diagnosis. Her hands trembled as she turned the page. Chemical diagrams she couldn't fully interpret filled the space, though her Lab training provided some context. But what struck her more than the science was Lyra's conviction. She wasn't just experimenting in isolation, she was racing against time. Then she had disappeared in the morning. Fog lifted reluctantly. The forest remained damp and heavy with silence. Rachel heated water on the portable camping stove she'd brought from their old apartment. They had no electricity yet, no plumbing. But Jonah approached his oatmeal like it was a feast. She watched him eat, feeling both guilt and gratitude settle in her chest. His color looked better. He'd slept through the night without coughing. Was it just the clean air here, or something more? As he rinsed his spoon with bottled water, he paused. "Mom, did you hear someone walking last night?" Rachel's blood chilled. "No," she said carefully. "Why?" Jonah looked down. "I thought I heard footsteps. I saw something too, maybe a flashlight outside the window. But it could have been a dream." Rachel didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood and walked to the back door, opening it slowly. The porch boards groaned under her weight as she scanned the woods. Nothing visible, but the feeling remained. Later that morning, they followed Jonah's earlier discovery, a half-buried metal structure about 30 yards into the woods. It wasn't a shed. It was a bunker, squat and square, with a rusted steel door and no windows. Rachel brushed aside brambles and cleared dirt from the handle. The old key from the box clicked into the lock with surprising ease. Inside, the air was stale but dry. A single narrow room unfolded before them, metal shelves lined with labeled jars of preserved herbs, test tubes, faded notebooks stacked in crates. In the center, a workbench with an old microscope. The room felt cold and lifeless, yet strangely intact. She built this to last, Rachel whispered as she stepped inside. Jonah trailed behind her, cautious but curious. "Is this her lab?" he asked. Rachel nodded slowly. "It has to be." She opened one of the notebooks, carefully turning fragile pages. More notes, this time with test data, patient observations, recorded progress. At the bottom of one page, a chilling phrase was underlined twice. "The compound works. They cannot have it." Suddenly, a loud crack echoed outside. Rachel jumped. Jonah gasped. They rushed to the door, peering into the woods. Nothing but trees, yet something or someone was out there. Rachel locked the door behind them and pulled Jonah. Close as they walked back toward the cabin, her heart raced. The woods no longer felt empty. Something had shifted. Back at the house, she called Ben Holloway. She'd met him briefly at the auction, a man in his 50s with graying hair and a quiet, capable manner. He lived off-grid outside town and offered handyman work for those who didn't ask too many questions. Rachel figured he might be the kind of person who could help without blinking at the strange. Ben arrived that afternoon in a dusty pickup, toolbox rattling in the back. He surveyed the property, stepping through the cabin with a practiced eye. "Place has good bones," he said. "Old school. Craftsmanship. Foundation's better than most new builds." He paused. "But someone's definitely been here since it was abandoned." Rachel looked up sharply. "How do you know?" He pointed to the door frame. "Scratches in the wood. Fresh ones like someone's picked." "The lock recently?" He lifted a clump of disturbed dirt by the steps. "And see this. Boot prints. Heavy ones, not yours." She swallowed hard. Why would someone come back now, after all these years? Ben shrugged. "Depends what they left behind." He paused, then added, "You're not in trouble, are you?" Rachel considered lying, but didn't. Instead, she handed him the journal. Ben read in. Silence for several minutes, nodding slowly. Then he looked at her, something hard and certain in his expression. "Whatever you found here," he said, "someone wanted it buried. And if they know you found it, they won't stay away long." That night, after Jonah was asleep, Rachel sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, listening to the forest breathe. Somewhere behind the trees, an owl called. She opened the journal one more time, letting it fall to a random page. It read, "I built this place for healing, for truth. If they silence me, let someone else carry the torch." The cabin will choose her. Rachel looked up toward the stars. It had been a gamble, one last desperate gamble. But now it felt like fate had chosen her back. The next morning began with silence, but not the peaceful kind. Rachel opened the cabin door with her coffee mug in hand and stopped cold. The morning sun revealed something she hadn't noticed the night before: boot prints. Deep, fresh ones. They circled the cabin, weaving around the porch steps, cutting across the patch of flattened weeds near the back. Not hers. Not Jonah's. Someone had been here while they slept, thought. She turned back inside and locked the door quietly, heart beating faster. Jonah was still asleep, curled in a tight ball, breathing soft and steady. She tiptoed to the kitchen and grabbed her phone. Ben answered on the second ring. "They were here," she whispered. "I'll be there in 20, he said. Ben arrived with a crowbar strapped behind his seat and a small toolbox in hand. He knelt in the dirt beside the cabin steps, studying the tracks like a hunter reading signs. "These are at least size 11, he muttered. "Work boots, heavy tread, recent maybe within 6 hours. He stood slowly. "They didn't just walk through. They circled. Why?" Rachel asked, arms folded tight across her chest, then studied her face. "Because they're watching." He inspected the well next. Rachel had shown him the pump system connected to a water tank behind the cabin, rudimentary but functional. After a few minutes of silence, Ben called her over. "Smell this." She leaned down cautiously. The water smelled metallic, but something. Sharper to a chemical tang like paint thinner or old gasoline. Ben unscrewed a valve and drained some into a glass jar. The liquid had a slight greenish tint. "Someone poisoned your water," he said bluntly. "Low dose could have made Jonah sick without killing him. Makes it look like allergies or cabin mold." Rachel's blood ran cold. Why would anyone do that? Then gave her a long look. "You said this research is valuable, right? Valuable enough to make people angry?" Rachel nodded slowly. "More than angry. It could change everything." They spent the rest of the day outside. Rachel didn't want to be indoors anymore. Jonah, blissfully unaware of the threat, explored the backyard with a stick he insisted was a wizard's staff, while Ben installed makeshift motion sensors from his truck. Rachel sat with Laura's journal on her lap, flipping through pages with new urgency. Halfway through the book, she found an entry labeled simply, "The Visitor." "He came again today, second time this month. Same offer, more money, more insistence. Said the world needs my work, that I'm being selfish. When I refused, his voice changed, cold, not business anymore, control. I saw the glint in his eye, ownership. He said, 'Don't be foolish. Dr. West, everyone has a price.' I told him mine was already paid in blood and sleepless nights and conscience. He didn't like that." Rachel exhaled slowly. "So it wasn't just corporate interest," she murmured. Ben leaned over from where he was installing a camera above the door. "What do you mean?" "She wasn't paranoid," Rachel said. "She was being hunted." That night, the offer came. Rachel had just tucked Jonah in with his stuffed wolf, his guardian, he called it, and stepped outside to breathe. A silver sedan pulled up the driveway, tires crunching on gravel. She instinctively stepped back behind the porch post. The car stopped, headlights went dark. A tall woman stepped out, mid-40s, sleek. Pantsuit, heels sinking slightly into the soft earth. She carried a leather folder in one hand and wore a smile sharpened to a blade. "Miss Emery," the woman called. "I hope I'm not intruding." Rachel didn't respond. "I'm Delilah Langston, Vice." President of Strategic Acquisitions at Novogen Biotech. Rachel's throat went dry. Langston, Victor Langston's daughter. I believe you've come into possession of some property that holds unique value to our company, Delilah continued. We'd like to make you an offer. Rachel stepped into the open, hands clenched at her sides. This property isn't for sale. Delilah's smile didn't waver. We're prepared to offer you $500,000 cash, no questions asked, as is. Rachel laughed bitterly. No questions asked. Delilah tilted her head. Look, I understand how tempting it is to chase ghosts, but what's buried here is better left that way. You're a single mother. Imagine what that money could do for you, for your son. Rachel's face hardened. I already imagined it. And I still said no. Delilah's smile cooled. Then I suggest you reconsider quickly. Without another word, she returned to her car. The engine started and the vehicle reversed out of the drive without haste, then emerged from the side of the cabin, crowbar in hand, face grim. I heard all of it. She's bluffing, Rachel muttered. Ben looked at her. No, she's warning. Rachel couldn't sleep. The moon was sharp in the sky, casting long shadows across the floorboards. The forest no longer felt sacred, it felt watched. Sat by the window with the journal in her lap, reading Lara's final entries. They were fragmented, rushed a woman, losing time and faith in safety. If you're reading this, it means I've lost the war, but maybe not the battle. They'll come. They'll offer more, then they'll take. Rachel closed the book and pressed her forehead to the cool window glass. She didn't have the luxury of walking away. Jonas stirred in his sleep, mumbling something unintelligible. Then, loud enough to make her freeze, he whispered, "She's outside." Rachel turned. Jonah's eyes were closed. Asking me to find what she left behind, he mumbled. Rachel felt every hair on her arms rise. He turned over and went still again. Outside, a soft breeze moved through the trees. But something else moved too, a presence not cruel, but not resting doubt. Rachel had never believed in ghosts. But by the time morning lit the sky over elder pines, she was no longer sure what she didn't believe. Jonah remembered nothing of what he'd said in his sleep. When Rachel asked if he'd had any dreams, he shrugged, spooning oatmeal into his mouth. Just trees, he muttered. Maybe a shadow. Can we go exploring again today? She nodded slowly. Later, after I check something. When Ben arrived mid-morning, Rachel led him straight to the back of the cabin. Beyond the rusted rain barrel and the line of cedar trees where grass gave way to wild underbrush. She had followed Jonah's direction from the night before. He'd pointed vaguely toward the woods, saying, "She wants us to look where the trees bend toward the sun." It had sounded like nonsense then. Now she wasn't so sure. They reached a patch of overgrown ground where vegetation grew in tangled patterns, wild, yet strangely intentional. Ben crouched and brushed back the weeds. "Huh," he said. "That's not random." Rachel dropped beside him. "What do you mean?" "These rows," he said, drawing a line in the dirt. "They're planted not by chance. Somebody laid this out years ago." He stood, turned slowly, and pointed toward a cluster of raised earth mounds arranged in a curved arc. "You're standing in an herbal garden, or what used to be one." Rachel looked around, her eyes adjusting to the pattern. Lavender gone wild, mint and thyme spilling into each other. And at the center, a gnarled tree with white bark and crimson-tipped leaves. "That's not native," Ben said, frowning. "No," Rachel whispered. "That's what Lara called the red shine hybrid. She cultivated it. Said it had rare properties." "From the journal?" Rachel nodded. "It's the plant she built her compound around." Ben stepped carefully toward the tree. At its base, the soil looked disturbed, softer than the rest. He pulled a small spade from his back pocket and began digging. Less than a foot down, his metal tool hit something solid. Rachel knelt beside him, brushing away dirt to reveal the edge of a rusted tin box larger than the first one they'd found. She pried it open. Inside, sealed in wax paper and protected by cloth, were dozens of neatly bound pages. A cassette tape labeled April 1987, and a photograph. Lara standing in this very garden, smiling, holding a basket of herbs. But it wasn't the serene smile from earlier photos. This time, her expression was wary. Behind her, half hidden in the frame, stood a man in a dark suit, sunglasses on despite the overcast sky. Rachel's breath caught, then studied the photo. "That him? I think so," she said. "Victor Langston." Beneath the documents lay another sealed envelope. On the front, written in steady script, "If they silence me, you must speak. LW." They returned to the cabin and spread the contents out on the table. Rachel carefully unfolded the page's diagrams, patient data, trial results. She recognized terms from her own training: immune modulation, cytokine balance, DNA expression mapping. "This is beyond groundbreaking," she whispered. She wasn't just experimenting, she had it mapped, documented, verified. Then inserted the cassette into a small battery-powered player he'd brought from his truck. Lara's voice came through, soft and clear. "They say they'll pay. They say they'll patent. But they'll bury it just like they buried every cure that doesn't turn profit. I didn't come here to sell my soul. I came to give something back. If I disappear, if this work disappears with me, then no one will remember why I fought." The tape clicked off. Rachel sat frozen. Ben leaned back in his chair. She knew. And she knew they'd come. Rachel looked toward the window, toward the place where the garden waited beneath decades of decay. "She didn't just grow medicine," she said softly. "She planted truth. And now we found it." That evening, a knock came at the door. Rachel froze, her body taut with instinctive fear. Ben stepped beside her, silent as a shadow, hand resting on the baseball bat he'd positioned near the door earlier. But it was only Agnes Thorne, the elderly neighbor, stood with a basket of fresh bread and a face full of quiet steel. "I heard. You stirred up the Westwood ghosts," she said. Stepping inside without waiting for invitation, Agnes looked around the room, like someone reacquainting herself with an old friend. Her eyes lingered on the journal spread open on the table, then on the cassette player. "I was here the night she vanished," she said finally. The lights in her lab were still on. Her truck was in the drive, but no one ever saw her again. Rachel leaned forward. "Did she say anything to you about being threatened?" Agnes hesitated. "She said something was coming, something she wouldn't run from. She told me, if I disappear, Agnes, make sure the right hands find what I left." She turned toward Rachel. "I think those hands are yours." Later that night, after Jonah had fallen asleep and Agnes had gone home, Rachel sat outside with Ben, watching the last light bleed out of the trees. "I keep thinking this will stop feeling unreal," she said. "But it doesn't," Ben stared toward the garden. "That's because it is real. Too real. And people like Victor Langston, they're betting you won't have the stomach to finish what she started." Rachel didn't answer right away. Then she said, "He sent someone, a woman, offered me $500,000 to walk away." Ben turned to look at her. "And you're still here?" Rachel nodded. He nodded back. "Then you're stronger than you think." A breeze moved through the trees. Somewhere far off, an owl called into the dark. Rachel looked back at the cabin, its windows reflecting moonlight. For the first time, it didn't feel abandoned. It felt alive watching, waiting. Rachel woke to the sound of coughing, dry, rasping, sharp. She bolted upright. "Jonah," she called, already crossing the room. He was sitting up in bed, clutching his chest, gasping for air. His face was pale, eyes wide and panicked. Rachel grabbed his inhaler from the nightstand and placed it in his hands. He took 2 quick puffs. Nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. Rachel's blood ran cold. She yanked the inhaler from his hands, unscrewed the canister, and peered inside. Empty. No, not empty. Water. Her hands trembled. Someone had tampered with it. Get in the truck, she told him, voice steady only through sheer force of will. We're leaving now. They arrived at Ben's cabin 10 minutes later. He lived just outside Elder Pine's boundary line in a 2-story structure he'd built with his own hands-off grid. Secure, guarded by motion-activated lights and a loyal German shepherd named Remy, Ben took one look at Jonah's wheezing, pale form and ushered them inside without a word. Rachel explained what had happened as she paced the living room, words coming fast and sharp, fury building with each syllable. When she told him about the inhaler, Ben's expression darkened. That's not just intimidation anymore, he said. That's attempted murder, Rachel nodded. They're trying to scare us away, but this was aimed at Jonah. She ran a hand through her hair. I didn't sign up for war, Ben. I just wanted a place to live. Ben looked at her. You found more than a place? You found a secret someone's been trying to bury for over 30 years. That afternoon, Ben inspected Rachel's truck before she made any plans to leave. He lay on the gravel driveway beneath the vehicle for several long minutes. When he crawled out, his face was grim. Brake lines have been cut, he said. Clean. Slice. Professional. Rachel's knees almost gave out. If you'd driven down the hill this morning, she didn't need him to finish. Ben stood and wiped his hands on a rag. We need help. Not just each other. The local sheriff won't touch this, but someone higher might. Rachel hesitated. You think it's time for the FBI? Past time. That evening, Rachel called Dr. Mara Ellington, her former supervisor from her time working in medical research before she had Jonah. Dr. Ellington had always been more than a boss. She'd been a mentor, someone who believed in Rachel's mind. Even when Rachel D.I.D.N. single quotes T. Rachel had sent her copies of Lyra's work days ago. Now her voice was tight with urgency. Mara, someone sabotaged Jonah's inhaler, our truck. This isn't just intimidation anymore. There was a pause. Rachel, Mara said, I believe you. And I've already contacted a journalist I trust, Catherine Wyland, Pulitzer finalist. If this story gets out, it gives us protection. Rachel rubbed her eyes. I'm not trying to be a hero. I just don't want Jonah to die. You won't be alone? Mara said firmly. But you need to secure those originals' digital backups, off-site storage. Hide them in 3 places and don't tell anyone where. And the FBI, I'll connect you. That night, as rain tapped against the windows of Ben's cabin and Jonah finally drifted into shallow, exhausted sleep, Rachel sat in the kitchen sorting through everything. Lyra's journal, the scientific data, the cassette recordings, the photographs, and the tape of Langston's threats. She opened the sealed envelope marked, If they silence me, you must speak. Inside was a letter, If this finds its way. To you, I am likely already gone. They came to buy, and when I refused, they came to claim. You must be careful. The cabin was only the first fault. The second is where my story ends. Look where the apple trees lean. There, beneath the roots, I've left the final piece, not just science, but proof of what's done, of who took me. It will come for you just as they came for me, but the truth will bloom again if you plant it in the right soil. Rachel set the letter down with shaking fingers.